You know, when a massive construction project goes way off track, the blame game kicks off almost immediately. And we're talking millions, sometimes billions of dollars on the line. So today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating and frankly pretty controversial technique used to figure out what went wrong by literally rewriting project history.
So, just imagine it. A brand new skyscraper, a huge bridge, some massive industrial plant. It's finally built, but it's months, maybe even years behind schedule. The owner is losing money hand over fist. The contractor is slapping them with bills for all the extra time. So, how do you figure out who's really on the hook for all that cash?
Well, that's where something called forensic schedule analysis comes in. And you should really just think of it like CSI for construction projects. These analysts are the detectives. They dig through mountains of emails, daily reports, and project schedules to piece together what actually happened and solve the mystery of the delay.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at this whole project delay puzzle. Then we'll get right into what collapsed as-built actually is and how that collapsing part works. After that, we'll get to the good stuff, its strengths, and oh yeah, its pretty major weaknesses. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the analyst's final word.
So the real puzzle for these project detectives is that they have to figure all this out when the dust has already settled. You can't just go back and watch a recording of the project. You have to somehow rebuild what actually happened to figure out what difference any single event really made.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Most ways of analyzing delays are additive. It's like they start with the original blueprint and then they start plugging in delays to see what happens. They ask, what if we add this problem? But the collapsed as-built method, or CAB, it flips that on its head. It's deductive. It starts with the messy, finished project and asks a totally different question. What if we could magically remove this delay?
All right, let's put a formal name to this thing. What exactly is the collapsed as-built method?
So here's the core idea, in a nutshell. An analyst spends a ton of time building a perfect, detailed schedule of how the project was actually built. That's the as-built part. Then they go in and surgically remove a specific delay, let's say a 2-week delay caused by the owner. The whole point is to figure out when the project would have finished, quote, but for that one event. It's a way to point to one specific problem and say, that right there, that's what cost us 14 days.
Now, just so you're in the loop, you might hear this called a few other things out in the wild. But for analysis, as-built less delay, subtractive as-built, it's all the same idea, really. Different branding, same technique. The key word is subtractive.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty. How does an analyst actually perform this digital surgery on a project's timeline? Let's walk through the collapsing process step by step.
Okay, step 1, and this is a massive job, is to reconstruct history. The analyst builds that detailed as-built schedule. Step 2, they go in with a magnifying glass and pinpoint the exact delays they want to investigate. Step 3, and this is the magic trick, they literally just pull those delay events out of the schedule. Poof, gone. And finally, step 4, they hit recalculate on the software, and just like that, the schedule spits out a new, earlier finish date. That gap between what really happened and what would have happened, that's your impact.
And check this out, because this visual is everything. This is the aha moment. On the left, you see reality, the project as it was built. It finished late on day 40. See those little problem bars? Awaiting information, shortage of labor? Those are our delays. Okay, now look to the right. This is after the collapse. The analyst has zapped out those specific delays they're arguing about. The computer does its thing, and bam, the new finish date is day 34. The conclusion is crystal clear. Those events, and only those events, caused a 6-day delay.
I mean, you can see the appeal, right? It is so powerful, it gives you a clean, simple number. So let's dig into why so many people use this method. Let's talk about its strengths. First off, its biggest selling point is that it starts from reality. You're using the as-built schedule, what actually happened, not some fantasy plan made years ago. And that but-for logic, it's so intuitive. You don't need to be a scheduling expert to get it. A judge, a jury, an executive, they can all grasp the concept. It's also like a scalpel for isolating the impact of one single event. And you don't even need a perfect set of original plans, which, let's be real, almost never exists anyway.
But, and this is a huge but, this method is incredibly controversial. For every analyst who loves it, there's another one who thinks it's just smoke and mirrors. So we have to look at why it's so debated. Let's dive into the weaknesses.
Okay, first big problem. Just building that as-built schedule is a monster of a task.
We're talking weeks, sometimes months of painstaking work. But here's the real bombshell criticism: the logic. How an analyst decides that task A had to happen before task B, that is completely subjective. An analyst can, intentionally or not, build a logic in a way that just happens to prove their client's point. It's a huge potential for bias. It also completely ignores what the team on the ground was thinking at the time, and it really struggles with complex realities, like when two separate delays are happening at once.
And this quote just nails it. The retrospective creation of the underlying as-built logic is the single most subjective step in the process. Think about that. The entire analysis, the whole multi-million-dollar conclusion, hinges on these logical links that one person is essentially creating in hindsight. That's a little scary, right?
So, we've got these powerful strengths on one side and these really serious weaknesses on the other. So where does that leave us? What's the bottom line here? What's the analyst's final word?
It really all comes down to this. The collapsed as-built method is just a tool. It's like a very, very sharp knife. In the hands of a skilled, impartial surgeon working with good information, it can be incredibly precise and useful. But in the wrong hands or with bad data, it can be used to carve out a version of history that's just not true. The results are only as good as the person doing the analysis.
And that kind of leaves us with a pretty deep question, doesn't it? This whole technique allows us to digitally rebuild the past to see what might have been. But when the person doing the rebuilding can literally shape how that past gets put back together, how do we ever know which version is the real story?